Oral questions, questions orales. Honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, over 40,000 Canadians served our nation during the Afghanistan mission. 158 of those gave their lives. This was Canada's longest war, and it's the war of our generation. Yet the Prime Minister is considering cancelling the Afghanistan Memorial, and he already cancelled the War Memorial program for small communities. Mr. Speaker, Canadians want to remember and they want to honour our heroes. So why is the Prime Minister denying proper memorials for those who served and in some cases gave their lives?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
It is very important to honour the men and women who served in Afghanistan. In 2014, a motion for a memorial to this mission received unanimous support in this House. Also, the dates of the mission were inscribed on the National War Memorial. Veterans Affairs is working closely with Canadian Heritage to advance this initiative. More information regarding the project will be available in the coming months.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Centre for American Progress is actually a front for anti-Canadian energy activists who want to shut down Canadian jobs. In fact, they insulted Canadian energy workers by calling their jobs dirty business. And they were instrumental, of course, in Obama's rejection of the Keystone Pipeline. Their goal is clear: to shut down Canada's energy industry. And yet this week, our own Prime Minister is their guest of honour. Mr. Speaker, why is the Prime Minister aligning himself with an American organization that wants to kill Canadian jobs?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the party opposite, we understand that the environment and the economy go together, and I was very pleased to see the Prime Minister with all the provinces and territories making exactly that case, coming together to tackle climate change. We will also be working with the United States to tackle climate change because that is the right thing to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister is in Washington hanging around with anti-Canadian activists, it's now obvious that back here at home, his budget promises won't actually help working people. The latest evidence comes from TD Bank economists. According to TD, the Liberals will completely miss their balanced budget target, adding $150 billion in borrowed money, and yet that will have a very small impact on Canadian economic growth. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister admit that his reckless borrowing and spending won't actually result in growth? It'll only result in higher taxes and larger government.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives added $150 billion to Canada's national debt, and they failed to create growth with that spending, and that's because they spent money on fake lakes, on partisan advertising, and gazebos, none of which create growth. Our government will invest strategically in infrastructure, skills, and jobs and growth. In today's slow-growth economy, it is not the time to cut ideologically. It's the time to invest strategically, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Et maintenant, l'honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président, merci. Monsieur le Président, we had the biggest growth in G7, and the country was in surplus in November. We will see how to manage the economy. Et now, nous apprenons bien sûr que le Premier ministre se rend aux États-Unis dans sa période de passage. Il rencontrera un groupe qui est contre l'exploitation des sables bitumineux qui crée autant d'emplois chez nous. Le Center of the American Progress, un groupe qui se targue d'être contre l'exploitation de cette ressource naturelle et contre le sort des citoyens canadiens qui, eux, dépendent de l'exploitation de ces sables bitumineux. De nombreuses familles canadiennes dépendent de ces revenus-là. Est-ce que le Premier ministre expliquera aux Canadiens comment il peut être contre les emplois canadiens, Monsieur le Président?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. nous croyons que l'environnement et l'économie vont ensemble. C'est pour ça qu'on était à Vancouver, que le Premier ministre était avec les premiers ministres de toutes les provinces et territoires et ils ont décidé sur un plan ambitieux pour s'attaquer au changement climatique. Moi, j'étais là à Globe. Moi, j'ai rencontré avec les industries, incluant les industries énergétiques, et nous allons travailler ensemble pour prouver que l'environnement et l'économie vont ensemble.
Honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président, notre gouvernement a toujours travaillé pour que l'économie et l'environnement aillent ensemble, mais pas en créant des déficits de 150 milliards de dollars. Pas comme ça. Monsieur le Président, la banque TD prétend que le déficit de ce gouvernement pour les 4 prochaines années sera de plus de 150 milliards de dollars, Monsieur le Président. Ça n'a aucun sens. Vous le savez, Monsieur le Président, les déficits actuels sont des taxes de demain qui seront payées par nos enfants et nos petits-enfants. Comment vont-ils expliquer ça aux générations futures, Monsieur le Président?
Honorable président du Conseil du Trésor.
Monsieur le Président, on a hérité un déficit des conservateurs et la croissance économique anémique. C'est pourquoi on a une responsabilité d'investir afin de créer les emplois et la croissance économique. C'est exactement ce qu'on va faire dans le budget, Monsieur le Président.
Oui, bravo.
Honorable député d'Outremont.
Monsieur le Président, aujourd'hui, les députés voteront sur notre motion pour améliorer l'accès à l'assurance-emploi. Il s'agit d'exactement les mêmes propositions que les libéraux ont appuyées lorsqu'ils étaient dans l'opposition. Ils ont même dénoncé la réforme des conservateurs, notamment au Nouveau-Brunswick. Maintenant, au pouvoir, les libéraux ont à nouveau trahi leurs promesses. Pourtant, les pertes d'emplois se multiplient et il y a urgence d'agir. Pourquoi les libéraux refusent-ils d'appuyer des milliers de travailleurs canadiens qui en ont le plus besoin?
Bravo. Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to assure the member across the way and all Canadians that we're working very hard to reform an EI system that was modified with a mean-spirited purpose, a second purpose to help clearly businesses rather than workers. It's time that we renewed EI, and we are going to be bringing with a modernized system very shortly.
Honourable member for Outremont.
We're going to get to do that today if they vote with us, Mr. Speaker. We'll see how that goes. In opposition, the Liberals voted for increasing EI access, 360 hours as the norm across the country, and they were going to repeal the Conservative reforms. During the campaign, they swore that they'd protect the money workers paid into EI, and that's important because, you see, the last time the Liberals were in power, they stole $54 billion from workers and spent it on corporate tax giveaways. So, why are the Liberals now voting against a motion that would do just that, protect the EI fund? Is it because they plan on stealing workers' money again?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly, the goal of the system is to hear from Canadians, allow time to look at the changes that are necessary, and fulfill our election platform commitments. And, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we intend to do.
Honourable député d'Outremont.
The three elements of today's motion are directly in their campaign proposals. Will they vote with us? Yes or no? That's what Canadians will find out today. L'entente sur le bois d'œuvre vient bientôt à échéance, Monsieur le Président. L'industrie et les travailleurs de la forêt s'inquiètent que les États-Unis veulent à nouveau réduire les importations sur leur territoire. Depuis l'entente bâclée de 2006, les choses ont évolué. Le Québec, par exemple, a revu son régime forestier, répondant ainsi aux prétentions américaines concernant la concurrence déloyale. Lors de son voyage à Washington, est-ce que le Premier ministre va se tenir debout pour une fois et défendre notre industrie forestière?
Bravo. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire de Commerce international.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie l'honorable député d'Outremont pour sa question. La question de bois d'œuvre, Monsieur le Président, est une priorité absolue pour notre gouvernement. Nous travaillons de manière constructive avec nos partenaires américains et canadiens afin d'établir une marche à suivre qui est acceptable mutuellement. Nous demeurons résolus, Monsieur le Président, à maintenir l'accès stable au marché américain pour l'industrie de bois d'œuvre résidu canadien.
Member for Outremont.
Voici une marche à suivre pour l'avenir. Dites non aux Américains qui vont essayer d'imposer des nouvelles normes pour réduire notre forêt. C'est ça le problème. After promising to establish a national climate strategy 90 days after the Paris conference, last week's First Ministers' meeting on climate change simply managed to produce more meetings. All Canada has is the old Conservative timelines, the old Conservative targets, and no plan to even reach those. Does the Prime Minister believe that this satisfies the commitment that he made in Paris, and how proud is he to bring the Conservative climate strategy to Washington?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member opposite. We are thrilled by the agreement that was reached which was reached with the provinces and territories in Vancouver. We have taken, for the first time in our history, we have all the provinces and territories on board to take action against climate change, to meet our international obligations, and recognizes the importance of putting carbon pricing mechanisms. This is a real step. We are now entering into a work group process where at the end of 6 months, we will be able to show real actions that we are taking. Thank you.
The honourable member for Milton.
Less than 2 weeks ago, the finance minister announced that the Liberals were going to run a larger than expected deficit for the next 2 years, even before they add in the billions of dollars involved in spending on their new PEP projects. Wow. Last week was a break week where, no doubt, he would have heard from Canadians who are very concerned about the plan. Will the finance minister listen to Canadians and reconsider his plan for massive increased spending, higher taxes, and a commitment to long-term deficits?
Secretary for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for a question. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. We will take no lessons from the Conservative when it comes to the deficit. Mr. Speaker, we started in December already with our plan for the middle class. We cut the tax to middle-class families in December. We will continue in our next budget, Mr. Speaker, in helping Canadian families, which are Canada Child Benefit, which will help 9 families out of 10 and lift hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty. And we will make historic investment in our infrastructure. That's the way to grow the economy. They should listen from us and see what Canadians have decided on the 19th of October.
The honourable member for Milton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is one lesson I wish they learned from us as a Conservative government on deficits, and that's how to eliminate it. Mr. Speaker, StatsCan last week confirmed that we are not in a recession. And indeed, Canadians are left asking then, why is the finance minister hell-bent on acting as if we are in a recession? Or maybe, Mr. Speaker, the finance minister can confirm for us that we are not in a recession. Or does he have the same lack of confidence in StatsCan officials that he does in finance officials?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservative when it comes to the deficit. Mr. Speaker, let it be no mistake, the Conservative have less stuff with the deficits. The only one who don't understand that are the member of... Order.
We don't need any counting, okay? Colleagues, let's pay attention to what people are saying here. Let's not draw attention to personal attributes or characteristics. Let's focus on the content. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll keep my hands just there so they will be listening. So, Mr. Speaker, what I was saying to the opposite member is that we will make historic investment in our economy to grow the economy. That's what Canadians choose on the 19th of October. But let me be clear, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, we will be making investment which are responsible. We will continue to reduce our debt to GDP ratio, and we will still have the objective to balance the budget. That's what Canadians expect from us. That's what we'll deliver.
Honorable député Louis Saint-Laurent.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, pour nous, les conservateurs, les vrais créateurs d'emplois, les vrais créateurs de richesses, ce sont nos PME. On les respecte, on les estime. D'ailleurs, notre gouvernement a fait plusieurs fois des baisses, entre autres, de baisser le fardeau des PME pour l'assurance-emploi, et on souhaite le faire jusqu'à 2,09 $ pour 100 $ d'évaluation. Mais voilà que le gouvernement souhaiterait le maintenir à 2,31 $. Monsieur le Président, la question est simple. Est-ce que le gouvernement s'engage à ne pas alourdir le fardeau de nos créateurs d'emplois, de nos créateurs de richesse, de nos PME?
The Honourable Minister for Small Business and Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the question. This government ran on a platform. We committed to work with small and medium-sized businesses, and we committed to reduce the administrative burden as well as the tax burden on small and medium-sized businesses, and that's exactly what we'll do. I know the members opposite are excited to see the budget that we will be introducing on March 22nd. Stay tuned. It is coming. We look forward to working with you, and we look forward to working for Canadians and small and medium-sized businesses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
Stay tuned, eh? Stay tuned. Ouais, ben justement, le problème, c'est parce que le premier ministre, le chef du gouvernement, lors de la campagne électorale, n'était pas très respectueux envers les PME. Qu'est-ce que disait justement le premier ministre? Il a dit une portion importante des PME ne sont en fait que pour les Canadiens plus riches un moyen de payer moins d'impôts. Alors, Monsieur le Président, c'est mépriser les PME. Est-ce que le gouvernement s'engage à aider nos PME plutôt que de les mépriser comme l'a fait le premier ministre en campagne électorale?
The Minister of Small Business and Tourism.
I again thank the member for the question, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to rise in this House to remind Canadians that we made a commitment to lower the tax burden on small and medium-sized businesses, and that's exactly what we'll do. We know the members opposite are very good at picking appoint words and misinforming Canadians. That's something we will not do because we are committed to working with Canadians and we are consulting with small and medium-sized businesses and entrepreneurs because we know that's how we will grow the economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
Those very entrepreneurs they're consulting with will agree that stock options are one of the greatest financial innovations to attract the brightest young people here in Canada. Mr. Speaker, young superstar engineers, code writers, and IT pros accept lower pay today in exchange for a share of growth in the company tomorrow. The government's plan to double taxes on stock options will basically put them out of business altogether. Mr. Speaker, will the government rise today and announce it will cancel this job-killing tax increase and keep our brightest innovators right here in Canada?
Honourable Minister for Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite has raised this question before, and I've told them that we're engaged with small and medium-sized enterprises. We're engaged with the business community because they understand, not only when it comes to stock options, but overall they are very, very fond and very supportive of our innovation agenda, an agenda that makes us more competitive, makes us more productive, Mr. Speaker. We're helping small businesses scale up and grow. We're helping them compete globally, Mr. Speaker. We have a plan. We'll execute that plan, and we'll make sure we create an environment for businesses to succeed.
Now the member for Carleton.
Well, the environment of higher taxes on stock options will not allow them to succeed. But, Mr. Speaker, there's also a financial problem here. The government says it wants to treat gains from stock options as regular T4 income. But that, of course, would allow corporations to write it off and, in fact, render the entire change revenue negative. I wonder if the government can stand today and tell the House whether finance officials have briefed the Minister of Finance on the financial implications of this tax increase.
The Honourable Cabinet Secretary for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable for his question. We obviously see, Mr. Speaker, stock option as legitimate and valued form of compensation in our country, and we want to ensure that innovators and startups can grow in Canada. Mr. Speaker, as we work on Budget 2016, we've been hearing from Canadians across the country, including from the innovation and technology sector. Those concerns, those issues, Mr. Speaker, have been heard, and they will be considered as we work on Budget 2016. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister promised to be open and transparent on trade deals, but his government's approach is anything but open. Canadians are concerned about CETA and the TPP. Investor state provisions will have big implications for Canadians, affecting everything from environmental protection and labour rights to drug costs. Before the election, Liberals demanded the government consult Canadians and produce a cost-benefit analysis of trade deals. Now that they're government, where is the TPP analysis and where is the consultation with Canadians?
The Honourable Cabinet Secretary for International Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question as well as for her work on this file. Mr. Speaker, we committed during the election campaign to have a transparent and open examination of the TPP and of the provisions within it. We are undertaking that, Mr. Speaker. There will be a vote in Parliament on that treaty when the time comes, and it is being studied. And we are working at every available method of examining the treaty, Mr. Speaker, including examining the impact.
Monsieur
le Président, la semaine dernière, le gouvernement a annoncé que le Canada et l'Union européenne avaient apporté des changements au chapitre concernant les investissements dans l'accord de libre-échange. Mais encore, bien de questions se posent. On ne sait toujours pas quel sera l'impact sur leurs lois environnementales et si ce sera aux provinces et aux villes de payer la facture en cas de poursuite. Monsieur le Président, est-ce que la ministre peut nous expliquer en quoi ces changements vont réellement protéger nos lois environnementaux contre toute poursuite?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We were very pleased to be to do the legal scrub, to finish the legal scrub of the CETA deal. We believe that the environment and economy go together. We believe in the importance of trade deals. We also believe in the importance of environmental protections. CETA is a very good example about how you can protect the environment and also grow our economy. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, la guerre en Afghanistan fut menée par 40 000 courageux militaires canadiens, dont 158 y ont laissé leur vie. Plusieurs également ont été blessés physiquement et ou mentalement. L'ex-gouvernement conservateur a annoncé un monument national de commémoration pour ces vétérans, ainsi qu'un second monument pour les militaires ayant reçu la croix de Victoria. Clairement, ces deux projets sont maintenant dans les limbes, Monsieur le Président. Ce gouvernement peut-il enfin honorer nos vétérans et mener à bien la construction de ces deux monuments en disant oui dès aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. Well, I thank the member for his question. I will point out that the former government announced this project not only once but twice and failed to get it done in their 10 years in government. Us, with our work with Canadian Heritage, will continue to work with the men and women, both involved in that theatre and otherwise, to work closely to move forward on this project in a timely manner. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have enough of it. This House has been sitting for 4 months already, and yet the Minister has not been able to give me one real answer regarding the veterans. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about memorials for veterans. Will the Liberal honor our commitment to the Afghanistan Memorial in the upcoming budget, yes or no?
Yes, right. The Minister of Veterans Affairs.
The Conservatives demonstrated their commitment to recognizing the sacrifices of our Canadian Armed Forces by closing 9 Veteran Affairs offices and cutting 800 frontline workers. We will treat our veterans with care, compassion, and respect, as well as take commemoration forward in a dignified fashion. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister is waffling. Over 40,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces served in Afghanistan fighting terrorism and barbarism. 158 Canadians made the ultimate sacrifice in service to Canada. The Afghanistan mission was started under a Liberal government, and it was the longest deployment of the Canadian Armed Forces in history. Canada has a proud military history, which includes the war in Afghanistan. So why is this Liberal government dishonouring our Afghanistan veterans and cancelling the national memorial to Canada's mission in Afghanistan?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
I couldn't agree more with the member. We do have a duty to honour and respect those men and women who have served in Afghanistan. This government understands the importance of commemoration, whether it's through Vimy Ridge, through World War II, through our peacekeepers, and also through Afghanistan. We're going to be working closely with those men and women who served, as well as the organizations who want to see this project go forward. I asked the member to give us time. His government couldn't get it done in 10 years. We'll get it done.
Député de Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles.
Monsieur le Président, les soldats qui ont sacrifié leur vie pour défendre notre pays sont honorés lors du jour du souvenir. Cette commémoration est essentielle pour honorer la mémoire de ceux qui ont péri et se rappeler les vétérans qui ont survécu. Pourquoi le gouvernement annule le programme qui vise à rendre hommage aux vétérans et quelles consultations ont été menées auprès des vétérans pour prendre cette décision?
The Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, as I've been pretty clear on, this government understands the importance of commemoration and recognizing the men and women who have served in our armed forces. We will treat them with care, compassion, and respect, not only getting them the services they need, but also the commemoration they deserve. We will not continue with the Fontino follies of the last 10 years, and we'll do things better on this side of the House.
Now the member for Desnete, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, 6 weeks after my community of La Loche experienced a profoundly painful tragedy, we do not have the mental health support we need to deal with the crisis in our community. Many people are showing signs of PTSD, but they have literally no one to turn to for help. Will the Minister of Health send help to La Loche immediately and urgently invest in culturally sensitive mental health services for communities in northern Saskatchewan?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite knows, I traveled to the community of La Loche along with our Prime Minister to pay our respects and condolences to the families who experienced this horrific tragedy. I am concerned, as the member is, about the mental health of the folks in that community who have suffered so much. That is why I have worked with my officials in Health Canada and with the First Nations Inuit Health Branch. I have received a letter from the member opposite last week. I returned a letter to her today. I will continue to work with her to address these needs.
The Honourable Member for Churchill-Kiwatnock-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, Pimichikamak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba is suffering through a suicide epidemic. 5 people have taken their lives and as many as 18 suicide attempts have taken place in the last number of weeks. This didn't just happen. A 17-year-old Amber Muskego says there's nothing for young people to do in her community. This is the face of crushing poverty and growing inequality in Canada. And that is why First Nations are asking for support in terms of education, recreation, and jobs. So will the government listen to Amber and step up to support young people in Pimichikamak and First Nations across the country?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
I thank the member for her question and for her ongoing advocacy. Hope in these communities is essential to being able to want to go on and to be able to live and see yourself in contributing in society. And we are committed to make those investments in education and in the social infrastructure that will allow those young people to have hope. And we thank the member for her collaboration in this.
Monsieur le Président, depuis mon élection, je rencontre un grand nombre de gens et de groupes incroyables de ma circonscription. Je juge que les gens de ma circonscription devraient avoir un accès accru à leurs députés et qu'il est dommage que nous devions parfois refuser ou annuler, remettre de telles rencontres à plus tard. Le leader du gouvernement en Chambre peut-il expliquer à cette Chambre comment le travail qu'il entreprend afin de faire du Parlement un meilleur endroit pour la conciliation travail-famille aidera également les gens de ma circonscription?
Leader du gouvernement en Chambre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais remercier mon collègue de Shefford pour sa question. Nous reconnaissons l'importance de moderniser et rendre nos institutions accessibles à tous, y compris les parents de famille. Nous devons également offrir aux gens un meilleur accès à leurs députés. Ils ne devraient pas attendre, comme mon collègue a dit, parfois plus d'1 mois pour nous rencontrer dans les bureaux de circonscription. Nos commettants connaissent l'important travail que nous avons à accomplir au sein de nos communautés et il est temps que nos institutions le reflètent aussi.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Live-In Caregiver Program Immigration Stream provides vital support for families who are looking after loved ones with physical or mental disabilities. Can the Minister assure the House that when he finally tables the long-overdue immigration levels report, there won't be cuts to spots available in the Live-In Caregiver Program?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her question. And I can assure you that the Caregiver Program, as it's now called, because the people are no longer obliged to live in, is an integral part of our immigration program. It provides extensive and much-needed care, not only for seniors, but also for young children. and the House can be assured that this program will remain an important part of what we do in terms of immigration.
The honourable member, the Calgary-Nose Hill.
I'll take that as a quite possibly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the immigration via the Federal Skilled Workers Program has long helped to build and strengthen the Canadian economy. With an aging workforce and major infrastructure projects on the line, provinces and territories and job-creating companies have been left waiting to hear from the government on its overdue immigration level support so that they can plan for the future of our economy. Can the Minister assure the House that when he finally tables this report, which is long overdue, that there won't be cuts to spots in the Federal Skilled Workers Program?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, the member might understand that the reason the report is a little late is because something called an election happened, which caused a delay. But I can assure the House that this report will be tabled within the prescribed time. And I can assure the House that while I cannot comment on the numbers yet, that the report will produce a large number of additional refugees. I think we all know that. But it will also do justice to caregivers, to economic immigrants, and to the family class, all of which need our support, Mr. Speaker.
Now the member for York Simcoe.
The Minister of Immigration says the Liberals need to change the Citizenship Guide because it's a bit heavy on the War of 1812. Less than one page out of the 68-page book is dedicated to this nation-building event that ensured Canada's continued existence. Do Liberals oppose letting new Canadians know that English, French, and First Nations people can work together effectively? Do they oppose letting Canadians know that when we fight, even against the odds, we win? Why the Liberal war on history?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
It's a bit much, at least a little speechless. We are not conducting a war on history. We may put a little bit less in, that is the conservative vision of history, but we are a party of history. We are a party of evidence, a party of science, and one of the worst things that party did was to abolish the long-form census, and I think their view of history is in the same pattern. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for York Simcoe.
The Prime Minister says Americans should know more about the rest of the world, but he wants Canadians to know less about their own country. Now, thanks to the Citizenship Guide, new Canadians do know the history of their country. They even know the difference between the Great Canadian Victory at Vimy Ridge and the Craven Vichy regime in France. Why does the Immigration Minister want to reduce the historical literacy of new Canadians? Just because he doesn't value Canadian history doesn't mean we should leave new Canadians in the dark about their country. Why the Liberal war on history?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Speechless, but that almost did it. I would suggest to the honourable member that the Liberals have a great appreciation of history. He says, I know history. I do have a PhD in economic history of Canada, so I think I know a little bit. And so I would tell the member that we are in the process of revising this document to make it a little bit less political, but in the end result, there will be a lot of history in there.
Député de Jean-Pierre.
Monsieur le Président, l'industrie forestière emploie plus de 60 000 travailleurs au Québec, dont 5 000 au Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. Après des années difficiles pour le secteur du bois d'œuvre, l'incertitude plane à nouveau avec la fin de l'accord. On ne sait toujours pas quelle position le gouvernement va prendre dans les nouvelles négociations avec les Américains. Le Québec a son propre régime forestier et il faut le reconnaître. Est-ce que la ministre peut nous dire ce que ce gouvernement va mettre sur la table afin d'aller chercher un accord gagnant pour l'ensemble des industries au pays? Merci.
Bravo. Honorable secrétaire parlementaire de Commerce international.
Monsieur le Président, et je remercie l'honorable député pour sa question, qui est une question très importante. C'est une priorité absolue, Monsieur le Président, pour notre gouvernement. Ce qu'on cherche, c'est un accès stable, juste et équitable au marché américain pour notre industrie de bois d'œuvre au Québec et à travers le pays. C'est exactement ce qu'on va faire, Monsieur le Président, et on va employer tous les moyens à notre disposition.
The honourable member for South Okanagan West Kootenay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's trip to Washington is about more than cocktail parties and magazine spreads. The softwood lumber issue is important to Canadian industry from coast to coast, and workers are worried about how the new agreement will affect their livelihoods. Softwood lumber is again open to negotiation, and our industry is vulnerable. Will the Prime Minister stand up for Canadians and refuse to grant concessions on softwood lumber?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for International Trade.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. It is a very important issue for Canadians. It's an important industry, a very complex industry across this country. We are well aware of the complexity. We are going to ensure that we have stable, fair, and equitable access to the American market. We will use all means at our disposal, Mr. Speaker, and we will get it done.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is going to Washington this week to meet with groups who are openly anti-oil sands and anti-Canadian jobs. When the NDP members met in Washington to lobby against Canadian jobs, Canadians were appalled. But now our Prime Minister is doing it. There are Canadians, thousands of them across this country, who are out of work. Why is this Prime Minister whining and dining with people who hate Canada's energy sector instead of being in Washington lobbying for Canadian jobs and lobbying for the Canadian energy sector who will impact our Canadian economy?
The Honourable Secretary for Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the previous government, we believe in meeting with all voices around the energy sector. And I want to just inform you, Mr. Speaker, that in 2012, the previous government stated that environmental groups threatened to hijack our regulatory system to achieve their radical ideological agenda. Not exactly helpful language to build bridges and find common ground.
The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The expired Canada-U.S. softwood lumber agreement, negotiated under our previous Conservative government, put an end to one of the longest and costly trade disputes between Canada and the U.S., and it ensured 145,000 forestry jobs were protected in BC alone. How does the Prime Minister think that the U.S. will take him seriously when he's more focused on his outfit for the state dinner than securing a new softwood lumber agreement?
The Honourable Secretary for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. It bears repeating, and I say it once again in front of this House, that resolving the softwood lumber issue is an absolute priority for this government, for our Prime Minister, for our Minister of International Trade. We have consulted. We are working with our partners to find a constructive solution moving forward with our partners both in the United States and in Canada. We will ensure that this is done, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Well, the priority seems to be more what he's wearing or who he's wearing than actually getting an agreement done. Mr. Speaker, this week the Prime Minister is going on bended knee to Washington, and once again he's failed to renegotiate one of the most important trade agreements between our two countries. Instead of pandering to anti-Canadian lobbyists and abandoning yet another resource industry, when is this Prime Minister going to start fighting for Canadian jobs and bring home a balanced softwood lumber agreement?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for yet again the same question. Since this government took over on the 19th of October, the Prime Minister and the Minister of International Trade have used every single opportunity they have had to consult with our American partners and to consult with Canadians. We are moving forward in a constructive manner, Mr. Speaker. That is the best way to get it done, and that is how we will get it done.
The honourable member for York South-Weston.
Mr. Speaker, the 6th meeting of the Somalia High-Level Partnership Forum was recently held in Istanbul, Turkey. The meeting was attended by 46 countries, including Canada. With the end of the terms of the federal government and Parliament, 2016 is a decisive year for Somalia. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs update this House on this important meeting and on Canada's contribution to the international community's effort to support a more democratic, secure and prosperous future for the people of Somalia? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I am honoured to answer the first question ever asked in this House on Somalia by a Member of Parliament of Somalian origin. Mr. Speaker, this year will be crucial for Somalia. They will have a constitutional review, the implementation of a federal structure, and national elections. This would be a challenging agenda for any country, including Canada. Canada will be there with Somalia this year and for the long term.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, Mohammed Khalifa, Editor-in-Chief of Al Furqan newspaper in Windsor, Ontario, was recently hired as a life skills coach for, among others, Syrian refugees arriving in Canada. Now, B'nai B'rith, Canada's oldest Jewish human rights organization, has accused Al Furqan and its editors of directly contributing to the radicalization of Canadian youth by glamorizing murderous attacks on civilians in Israel as a sacred religious duty. Mr. Speaker, where is the federal oversight to prevent this sort of anti-Semitic, indeed terrorist indoctrination of new Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we indicated in the election platform, and it's in my mandate letter, that we will work with provinces and communities, organizations across the country to develop a new system of community outreach and effective counter-radicalization initiatives in order to make sure that we build strong individuals in strong communities defending the very best of Canadian values, and we will move on that expeditiously.
Monsieur le Président, l'an dernier, 25 000 personnes descendaient dans la rue pour Radio-Canada. Les libéraux étaient là avec leurs belles promesses. Pourtant, aujourd'hui, sous les mêmes libéraux, la maison de Radio-Canada est à vendre. La ministre va encore nous dire que la SRC est indépendante, mais la question n'est pas là. Qu'elle veut faire des consultations, il va être trop tard. La maison appartient aux citoyens, à tout le monde. C'est une partie de l'histoire de Montréal et c'est tout un quartier qu'on va abandonner. Est-ce que la ministre peut enfin exiger un moratoire sur la vente le temps que toutes les options soient étudiées et soient enfin rendues publiques?
Honorable ministre du Patrimoine canadien.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais remercier mon collègue pour sa question. Nous comprenons que la Maison de Radio-Canada est un symbole important et en tant que député et ministre de la région montréalaise, je veux m'assurer, bien entendu, que la direction de Radio-Canada consulte bien les personnes autant du milieu politique montréalais que les employés et les syndicats. Le plus important, étant donné la vétusté de la Maison de Radio-Canada, est que nos employés à Radio-Canada et à CBC aient accès à un milieu de vie qui est moderne, un milieu de travail qui puisse répondre à leurs besoins.
The Honourable Member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Oui, Monsieur le Président. Le 3 mars dernier marquait le lancement de l'édition 2016 des rendez-vous de la francophonie à travers le Canada. Cet événement annuel met en évidence plus que 2300 activités rendant hommage à la culture et à la langue française. J'ai pu, la semaine dernière, y participer des écoles acadiennes de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Je demandais à la ministre du Patrimoine de, s'il vous plaît, nous donner plus d'informations sur le rendez-vous de la francophonie. Merci.
Honorable ministre du Patrimoine canadien.
Je remercie le député pour sa question. Le coup d'envoi des rendez-vous de la francophonie a été donné la semaine dernière et c'est vraiment une occasion unique pour célébrer la francophonie à la grandeur du Canada. Des activités sont organisées du 3 au 23 mars à travers le pays pour en fait célébrer tous les francophones, les Québécois, les Acadiens, les francophiles, voire même les franco-curieux, comme le dit bien le député d'Edmonton Centre. Patrimoine canadien appuie les rendez-vous de la francophonie à hauteur de 2,8 millions de dollars au cours des 3 prochaines années. Merci.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, later today, members of Parliament, of the Pakistani community, and of the Bhatti family will gather here to honor the life and legacy of Shahbaz Bhatti, a Pakistani federal minister who was assassinated for his advocacy on behalf of Pakistan's minorities. Shahbaz was the inspiration for the Office of Religious Freedom, and the Bhatti family have been clear in their support for it. So will the government give them good news today and commit to keeping this office open after March 31st?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, whatever structure we'll put in place, it will be to strengthen the protection of religious minorities around the world, as the one my honourable colleague mentioned. We have only one goal here, is to be sure that freedom of religion will be highly protected and will be a priority for Canada.
Honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Monsieur le Président, même si les tribunaux de l'OMC et de l'ALENA ont toujours rejeté les accusations de dumping et de subventions illégales contre notre industrie forestière, le Québec a changé son régime forestier pour être au-dessus de tout soupçon. En effet, depuis 2013, notre bois est vendu aux enchères publiques, exactement comme aux États-Unis. Pourtant, le fédéral n'a rien fait pour faire reconnaître cet fait aux Américains. Le gouvernement va-t-il profiter de la visite du premier ministre à Washington et de la trêve actuelle pour faire reconnaître aux Américains que le régime forestier québécois est irréprochable?
Honorable secrétaire parlementaire du commerce international.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie l'honorable député pour sa question. On est au courant des changements qui ont été apportés au régime québécois en bois d'œuvre et nous sommes au courant des changements et des autres régimes qui existent au pays. Nous sommes en train de, justement, créer des liens, d'employer tous les moyens à notre disposition pour trouver une solution juste et équitable pour s'assurer d'un accès stable au marché américain.
Honorable député de Mirabel.
Monsieur le Président, l'accord de libre-échange avec les États-Unis était censé nous garantir une paix commerciale. Pourtant, l'industrie forestière passe d'un conflit à l'autre. Notre industrie n'a rien à se reprocher et ne souhaite qu'une seule chose, le retour du libre-échange comme le prévoit l'ALENA. En restant immobile devant ces mesures protectionnistes, le gouvernement fait souffrir l'industrie forestière du Québec. Quand est-ce que le gouvernement et surtout ses députés élus au Québec vont-ils se lever et se tenir debout pour notre industrie forestière et nos travailleurs?
Honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie l'honorable député pour sa question. Je peux assurer l'honorable député que le Premier ministre ainsi que la ministre du Commerce international, dès leurs élections au mois d'octobre, ont utilisé chaque occasion pour avancer le dossier, pour faire connaître nos positions à nos partenaires américains et pour s'assurer justement qu'on va avoir un accès stable au marché américain.
Honorable député de Bécancour, Nicolas Sorel.
Monsieur le Président, le groupe chargé de l'examen de la loi du transport mise en place par l'ancien gouvernement a déposé son rapport. Ce rapport, qui doit tracer l'avenir du transport au Canada, a tout simplement omis les questions de sécurité et de sûreté du transport ferroviaire, qui sont au cœur des préoccupations des villes du Québec. Le gouvernement va-t-il mettre en place les demandes des villes du Québec et exiger notamment que les compagnies ferroviaires les informent en temps réel de ce qui se passe sur leur territoire, et exiger le retrait immédiat des wagons DOT 111.
Honorable ministre des Transports.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie mon collègue pour sa question. Et comme il le sait, pour ce gouvernement, la sécurité ferroviaire est la plus grande priorité. Et bien sûr, le gouvernement précédent a mis en place des mesures pour augmenter la sécurité ferroviaire, incluant se débarrasser éventuellement des wagons-citernes DOT 111. Mais je peux vous dire que nous sommes en train d'examiner la sécurité ferroviaire afin d'augmenter la qualité de cette sécurité ferroviaire pour que les Canadiens soient rassurés. Merci, Monsieur le Président.